In the previous chapter, we saw how Tian Ran entered a room that contained many chained women, and after finding a sword, he killed the 2 mutants and finally reached Xiao Sheng, ending his life with precise cuts. That would have happened if someone had not intervened, because just before Tian Ran could end Xiao Sheng's life, someone fired a bullet that hit his sword, preventing him from attacking. Due to the shot, his sword started vibrating, and after several seconds, he was able to stop the vibrations and control the sword. Tian Ran was somewhat confused, and as he turned his head back, he saw a bunch of people approaching him. The person who had shot at Tian Ran's sword was none other than Yuan, who had entered the church with the secret police agents. While she was aiming at Tian Ran with her weapon, in a calm voice she ordered him to drop the sword on the ground. Despite hearing this order, Tian Ran simply continued to aim at Xiao Sheng while aggressively looking at Yuan. Seeing that the police officers had arrived at the church, Xiao Sheng crossed his arms to defend himself from Tian Ran's attack and explained to the officers that he wanted to kill him. He also asked them to shoot him as soon as possible so that his life would not be in danger. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran stared at Yuan and told her that he was not the person she should be aiming her weapon at. Upon hearing this, Yuan and the police officers were confused, and she asked him what he was talking about. Tian Ran simply continued pointing the sword at Xiao Sheng and asked Yuan to take a good look around. While Yuan was aiming the weapon at him, she looked to one side and saw 2 women chained up and trembling in fear. And looking to the other side, she saw more women chained up and hiding behind a pillar. She began to look at the chained women and started wondering what had happened here. While she was distracted trying to figure out how the chained women ended up here, one of the police officers caught her attention and started whispering to her, revealing that some of these women were the victims who had been reported missing previously. Yuan looked at the police officer and asked if he was sure. He replied that there was no way he could be mistaken since he had seen the photos of these women before. Upon closer inspection, she noticed that this room not only contained enslaved women but also supplies and jewelry. Seeing this, she became tense and started wondering what was happening in this church. At that moment, another police officer appeared and informed Yuan that he had uncovered an important case. Upon hearing this, she was surprised and turned towards him, asking for an explanation. He approached her and began whispering in her ear to inform her about the discovery of a female body with a grotesque form of death in the main hall. The agent also added that they found the bodies of several cult members who were shot, as well as 2 corpses of mutated beasts in the side corridor. Upon hearing this, Yuan was both confused and surprised at the same time. She started thinking about what she should do now. After thinking for several minutes, she turned around and stared at Tian Ran, then she asked him not to resist as everything was under control. She also ordered one of the agents to notify the bureau and the hospital, and also requested some cooperative units to bring all their available manpower for support. The police officers handcuffed Xiao Sheng, and while 2 of them were escorting him towards the exit, he started laughing. While they were walking away, Xiao Sheng turned around and looked at Tian Ran, making a face. Then he started whispering to mock him, asking what he could possibly do to someone as powerful as him. Upon hearing these words, Tian Ran's eyes filled with fury. With a murderous look, he stared at Xiao Sheng, and while his body was surrounded by a killing aura, he began unsheathing his sword. Little by little, he began to raise his sword to attack Xiao Sheng, but just before he could make a decision, someone appeared behind him and placed their hand on the sword, telling him that they had already met before and asked if he remembered. With a piercing gaze, Tian Ran turned around and asked who it was. The person behind him was Yuan. She reminded him of the car accident that happened 3 years ago and how they both went to identify the bodies. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran calmed down and remembered that she was the police officer who had been with him. Now that he was calm, he congratulated Yuan for having a good memory and for guessing what he had planned to do. She gave him advice on how to handle feelings of hatred. She explained that he should stay calm and think rationally in order to avoid acting recklessly. She introduced herself as Yuan Wen from the military police station on the south side. She also added that she knew Bai had already met him, and she revealed to him that his DNA from the car accident 3 years ago had led them to him. Upon hearing this, Tian Ran was surprised and began staring at Yuan. Seeing this, she kindly asked him to calm down and listen to her. She reminded him of Xiao Sheng's words again and explained that it wasn't over yet, so they still couldn't kill him. She also explained to him that she knew his strength was extraordinary, and although she now had many police agents, she knew they would not prevent him from killing Xiao Sheng. She also mentioned that the Yan Wang Federation remained under the control of the military police and parliament, and it was not a place for lynchings. She asked Tian Ran to trust the military police as they did not forgive anyone who was guilty since it was their duty, and she also asked him to cooperate with the investigation and tell them everything he knew. Tian Ran thought for several seconds and then decided to sheath his sword. Upon seeing this, Yuan thanked him for his cooperation. At the same time, ambulances and police support arrived at the church, and nurses covered the women who had been kidnapped by the cult with white blankets and began taking them out of the church. Several doctors started attending to the women, and at the same time, their relatives arrived at the church and began crying upon finding them alive. While Yuen was escorting Tianran to her police car, one of the police officers caught her attention. She turned around and asked him what was happening. She walked away from Tianran and approached the officer. He began whispering and asked her if they should write a report about the dead cult members. She asked him to simply write that during the arrest, they encountered fierce resistance, so they were forced to respond with violence, and in the process, the other party was seriously injured and died. While Tianran was looking at them, he heard the entire conversation thanks to his highly developed hearing from eating the super crops. Once Yuen finished talking to the police officer, she looked at Tianran and with a smile made the OK sign and told him they could continue. Tianran started following Yuen, and at that moment, a stretcher containing a corpse passed by. He turned around and upon seeing a woman's hand, he realized it was the same woman who had been sacrificed by the cult. Upon seeing this, he couldn't help but become enraged as he hadn't been able to avenge the woman's death. Yuen looked at him and noticed that he was very angry. Tianran looked away and decided to continue on his way and not think about the cult as it was making him furious. But at that moment, someone caught his attention to thank him, and when he looked in the direction of the voice, he saw a blonde-haired woman who thanked him again for being her savior. This woman was one of the women who had been kidnapped by cult members, and while her mother was covering her with a white sheet, she smiled and with tears in her eyes. She explained to him that if it weren't for the explosion he had caused, which brought the military police, they would all have been sold as toys to wealthy people and eventually become food for mutant animals. Upon hearing the word toy, Tianran and Yuen were shocked. She asked the woman if she knew anything else. The woman put her hand under her chin and, while looking at the ground, revealed to them that she used to be a member of the Mutual Aid Society. However, they lied to her by telling her it was just a mutual aid society and that by bringing people into the cult, she could buy food at low prices. She also added that a few days ago, after discovering the true purpose of this mutual aid society, she tried to escape. But the other members noticed and locked her up. She also revealed to them that before being locked up, she was able to see the location of the cult's transaction logbook. Upon hearing this, Yuen was shocked as she thought that the transaction logbook could help them uncover the identity of the person behind it all. She asked the woman if she could tell her the exact location of the book with details. While the woman was revealing to Yuen and Tianran the location of the transaction logbook, someone started staring at them through the rearview mirror. The person who was looking at them was a police officer who was smoking a cigarette. The police officer let out the smoke from his mouth, and while he was looking at Tianran and Yuen, he told his partner that the Holy Lord controlled everything. They started the car and began to leave the abandoned church while the other police officers and nurses were attending to the women. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.